Hello and welcome to the Healing Insight podcast, episode 15, with me, Sarah Hunt.
And me, Jez Hunt.
Hello and welcome. Today's episode, we have the topic of listening.
Sorry?
Um, yeah, exactly.
I had to do that. I know it's childish, but hey,
Humour's good.
it is.
Humour's good. I took Alicia, my granddaughter, to get some lunch, and she decided to come out with all the worst jokes possible. And I had to listen and laugh. But all the old ones. So she's obviously been learning those from her mum.
Uh-huh. Yeah, but you see, to her, they're all new. So they're all fun and they're all exciting and they're all, she wants to share them with her nan. It's great.
Yeah, it was fabulous. Except I couldn't remember the answers to any of them. but but yeah. So listening, an important skill.
It is. It's more important than most people put on it, I think.
Yeah, I do feel that it is an underrated skill. Um, and certainly when I was nursing, it was something that I always felt very, very important. And people can listen but not hear,
Yes.
if that makes sense. So, they can be sat there and listening to something, but they can't, sometimes they don't actually process what's being said to them, or they kind of block it out because they don't really want to hear it, or because they're not listening properly, intently, and in the moment, they may misinterpret what the person's trying to tell them.
I think that's a key, actually. You said in the moment. I think the problem is that lots of people, through life, we get distracted, and we've got 101 things going on in our head at any one time if we allow it. So yes, you might be in a situation where someone's talking to you, but unless you're in the moment, you might have thoughts and that drifting through your head while you're listening, in inverted commas. But actually, you're also filtering it. So as I mentioned previously with NLP, we're bombarded by, was it 4.2 million bits of information at any one time, of which our brain can only process 132 bits. So we have to filter stuff. We have to delete, distort, and take the stuff out that's relevant to us in that particular moment. Based on the fact that you're also, the body's focused, or the unconscious mind is focused on survival. So is this life threatening? Would take priority over other things. Okay. So we're filtering stuff all the time, which means then we hear what we are expecting to hear or want to hear in that particular moment that's relevant to us. So we can actually distort what we interpret what we've heard.
Yes, absolutely.
When you're in the moment, like we are now, I am absolutely grounded. I can feel my toes on the ground. I can make sure that I am listening to you and not getting sidetracked by what my son might be doing in the other room as he's here for half term. Then I am present to what's going on around me in this moment and what's relevant to this moment.
Yes, and I think one of the things that's important when you're in the moment and you are truly listening to someone is that you use that time to process what they're saying and ask for clarity if you're not completely sure of what is being communicated to you.
Yes.
And when you're not in the moment, when mind's drifting and things, you miss things. You don't. You may, and if you miss things, then you may think you've understood it when actually you haven't.
Yes. First,
Doesn't
seek
that
to
make sense?
understand before to be understood. Yes.
Yes, indeed. So, so to me, listening is a really, really important skill, and certainly it was one that I developed as a nurse, because to me personally, it felt really important to make the patients that I was looking after feel that I really cared, that I wanted to help them, and that I was listening to what was important for them. And that did definitely make a difference, I feel, to their progress. And I feel it's so important in all walks of life. And if I think about it, the number of times as a mother when my children were small that I didn't listen properly, and then
Mm-hmm.
there'd be frustration and upset. And probably because I'd got so much going on. I was a single parent. I was doing demanding jobs. I was trying to run the house. I was juggling everything. And so, like you mentioned earlier on, it's like so much going on in the head. Whereas now, I'm much more aware of the importance of sitting down and listening. So I've spent some time with Alicia today, and we've sat and chatted as well as done jokes, so that I am listening to what she's saying rather than distracted doing other things at the same time.
And that's another valid point, because listening is not just about the words that are being said. Listening is listening with your whole body, your whole senses of all of the little intricacies that are going on in facial expressions, body language while the words are being said, the tone of the voice, the smiles or the frowns or the things that are going on, because it's not just about the words in terms of conveying what is actually meant and what is being understood. I think the other thing that came up for me then is silence.
Yes.
We particularly if you've got an overactive mind or your head's full of stuff, then we're in a rush to get things done. We're in a rush to get to the end of something. So be it a conversation, be it a whatever. In this case, someone's talking and we're listening. We have a tendency to fill the silence.
Yes.
Whereas taking that step back, not responding, churning it over in your head and saying, okay, have I understood this? So then asking a question if you haven't understood it, but then answering rather than diving in partway through the sentence thinking you know what the other person's about to tell you. And I'm sure you and I have both been in, not together, but been in conversations with people that do that, where
Yes.
they jump in before you've even finished saying what you've said and they've completely misunderstood.
Because they've jumped in and made assumptions from their own experience rather than recognizing that actually it's not their experience, it's my experience or your experience, and
Yes.
therefore you need to listen to what's being said. I think as well, silence is really important because silence gives us that opportunity to listen to ourselves, to listen to our soul. And so many people don't do that. And many people don't like even sitting in silence with somebody. And you can have a comfortable silence with someone that you're comfortable with, can't you? You don't have to sit and talk all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually sit quietly and just be. And that's the other thing about silence is being able to just be. And when you are able to just be, it's a lot easier to listen to yourself, to listen to what your body's telling you, to feel where the stresses are, to listen to what your soul's telling you, and what it is that you need to be looking at within your life to be able to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just about listening to others. It's like you say, it's listening to yourself. It's understanding what's right for you in that moment. We touched on a few episodes back. We touched on dis-ease, and if your body has something going on, if you've got a headache, you've got a pain in your arm or a pain in your knee or whatever, there is an energetic root cause to that. There's something your body is trying to say, actually, you need to deal with this, whether, find out what the root cause of this is and process it emotionally. So learning to listen to yourself and be comfortable listening to yourself is something that's so important to a healing journey and to our journey as individuals. Yet it can be the most uncomfortable thing we end up doing,
Yes.
is that turning in on ourselves, turning into ourselves and listening, being, accepting, forgiving us, accepting who we are for who we are right now. It's
Absolutely.
neither good nor bad. It just is. It's just where we are on our journey based on the experiences, the knowledge, the healing journey that we've done up to that particular moment in time. But people looking at themselves, it's a very uncomfortable experience for most people, myself
Yes.
included originally.
Yes, and me too. And you know, the number of times that I've not listened to myself in the past, and I've got myself in pickles, to put it mildly, you know, and I've got myself in situations, and I've looked and I thought, how the heck did I get here? Why am I experiencing this? What have I not done? And I've not listened to myself. I've not listened to the universe. I've not listened to the people around me, and then found myself in a situation that I could have avoided had I listened.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, as you grow older, you become more aware of the importance of listening. And as you progress on your spiritual journey, you realize the importance of listening, and on your healing journey as well. But it is so easy to not listen and when you're not listening, you're in your head rather than in your heart. You
Yes.
know, it's so easy to let your head take over. But when you can get yourself into the moment, and just sit quietly and be and drop into your heart center, it's so much easier to then know what's right for you, what's truth for you, and how to find your way forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, for listeners who want to improve their listening skills, some things that they could do. First thing that comes to my mind is one of the things Dad used to say: you got two ears, one mouth. Use them proportionally.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yes.
Bless him. I mean, the first sort of thing that comes to mind is meditation. It's a very good way, if you're doing intentional and practice meditation, of listening. So even if it's just intentional breathing, a very simple form of meditation, just focusing on your breathing and learning to listen to your breath, to what is actually coming up for you in that moment.
Yes, when I used to teach meditation, I used to do a listening meditation with people
Ooh.
and just get them into a nice calm place, and then get them to listen and see what they could hear. And suddenly they would notice things that their brain would have shut out before. So maybe a child laughing in the distance, or a bird singing, or traffic going by, or the sound of a stream as it's trickling along the bottom of the garden or wherever they happen to be. But the sorts of things, the idea behind it was to help them to realize that when you go into that nice, quiet space, you can hear things that you wouldn't normally notice. And then, of course, the focus can be taken to the body, and listening to the body. What's the body telling you now? And then, of course, taking it that bit deeper and going inwards, and what's your soul telling you? What is it that you feel is right for you at this moment in time? So it's a good little exercise to do, to just take yourself into a quiet space and be in the moment, using meditative techniques to help you to learn to listen.
Yeah. Closing your eyes, so shutting off your other senses at the same
Mm,
time, can also enhance your. So if you've got your eyes shut, you're then not processing anything visually, so you can turn your attention to your hearing more, and like I say, pick out things. They're always there. I mean, the bird song is there whether you're hearing it or not. It's just whether you're filtering it or not. Like I said earlier, we filter it out because we know it's there. It's not relevant to what we're doing in the moment and where our head is in that particular moment, so we switch it out. It's like when we lived at Cranfield, having the planes go over. you know
you switch it out, don't you?
Most of the time you didn't even, certainly living there, we didn't even notice that they were there and going over, unless it was a particular jet or some sort of air show.
Yeah, show. Yeah.
And yet they're there all the time. They were still going up and down every day or every weekend, or whatever anyway. So we filter stuff out. So by closing eyes when doing meditation, that can help enhance your other senses in terms of the visualization, as we talked a few weeks ago, a few episodes ago. It might have been the last episode, I can't remember which one it was. Whenever, recently. And then Yes, so it just helps enhance the bits we're trying to, in terms of focus, in terms of what we're trying
Yes.
to do.
Yes. One of the things I've been doing with my healing students recently, which some of them have found really quite difficult, is to get them not to take lots of notes when they're listening to information about healing that's being given to them, and as things shift and change, and techniques change and information changes. And I've been trying to get them to actually sit and listen,
Mm-hmm.
because when you're writing copious amounts of notes to try and remember everything, you take yourself into your head rather than in your heart. And so I've been encouraging students to sit and be in their hearts and just make the odd note, because I provide everything that's needed to be able to do the work that they're doing. But it's quite interesting to see how some of them really struggle with that. And I get that, because when I was younger and doing a lot of exams and stuff, I used to take copious amounts of notes. And but now I can see that if I'd actually sat and listened and make sure I understood, and then jotted down a couple of key salient points to remind me of what was important, that would have triggered everything that I needed. And I think that's one of the things that we forget, is that when we listen, we actually absorb an awful lot more than when we're in the moment, and sitting and listening and focused on what's being said to us. When we're in a teaching or a training situation, we actually take on board a lot more than if we're trying to write everything down.
Yeah, it's interesting because you just reminded me when I first started coaching, then I used to take a lot of notes when I was coaching a client. Now, and over time, but now I take, like you say, a few key points that may come up during the session, or something I want to go back to, or something that I think might be relevant to explore further. What I do, it always sounds funny. What I do is at the end of the session, after the session's finished, I will then take 10 minutes just to relax myself. And then I'll just spend 10 or 15 minutes writing up notes from the session.
Yes.
So I just allow myself to switch off for 10 minutes, like a little 10-minute meditation or something. And then just go into a 10-15 minute period of just remembering from the bullet points I put down, the few notes I jotted, just remembering the key points from that session. Because, bearing in mind there's a gap between me coaching client today and their next session, then it just adds as a reminder if I need to go back or whatever. Whereas before, when I first started doing it, I was taking loads of notes. Whereas now, it's hardly any until after the session. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find that way, when I'm listening to other people that are giving me information, it's a lot easier to make sure that I've understood what's being presented to me,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm actually sitting and I'm in the moment and I'm listening, rather than I'm there but I'm writing lots of notes.
Yes,
it,
because
you know
you're
it,
focused on what has just been said rather
yeah,
than what is being said. So you're always trying to catch up
exactly, when
because
you're
you're
taking notes. Yeah.
because your brain's processing slower. Your conscious brain is processing slower than you're able to keep up with both what's being said and what you're writing down, because
Yeah.
you're translating through to written word, for example, or even typing. You're still trying to process at that speed,
Yes,
which
absolutely. And of course, the other thing as well, when you're truly listening, you're in your heart center, and then that helps you to discern what's truth and what's not. And it's a lot easier, even if you're talking to somebody about events, and you're going to be looking at things from an outside perspective, perhaps, but it helps you then to pick up on what is actually truth, what has perhaps been, what's the word I want? I don't want manipulated, but if sometimes
distorted.
somebody has distorted, that's the word. So you can, as a coach, perhaps you can ask questions around things to help the person to look at it from a different perspective. And certainly as a healer, sometimes I need to um, ask questions, or make comments that will help people to look at things from a slightly different perspective, because when they change their perspective, that changes it changes the whole energy of everything, and the way that things flow and move forward for them. So So it is really important. And of course, it's so important when you're listening to yourself, because if you're in your heart, it's a lot easier to listen to what your soul wants. And when you're doing what your soul wants and what makes you really happy, then you're on purpose, and that will lead us into something else in another session. But we need to be listening to ourselves so that we step in the flow of life. We're moving with the flow and not doing what I was doing when I was younger and going round and round in circles, because I wasn't actually listening
Yeah.
until the universe went, stop. um, so it's so important to listen. I can't.
Yes. It is. I mean, it absolutely is key.
And I think with children as well. That was what I was going to. I thought about this a minute ago, and then you said something and it went again, and it's just popped in again. Sorry. But with children, it's so important to really listen to them and to get down to their level and to stop what you're doing so that you're giving them your full attention. And I know as a mother, as a busy mother, when my children were small, I wasn't very good at doing that. I would listen to them, but I'd often be washing up at the same time or doing something else. Whereas actually, when I think back, really what I should have done was stop what I was doing, sit down with them and say, come on, tell me what's going on. What's the matter? What's up? And I think, one of the things that I feel that has been lost over the last few years is sitting around the dinner table and talking to each other
Mm-hmm.
and listening to each other. We certainly did it as children, didn't we? And
Yeah.
I did do it with my children growing up. But, as things have progressed on, it doesn't happen as much as it used to, I feel. I mean, I might be wrong,
No, no.
but I don't feel it does. I think there's an element of that has disappeared, hasn't it?
Yeah. I think, for all the positives that things like mobile phones have given us, the amount of negatives have increased as well. Trying to get kids to, or even, well, not even just kids, people to talk to each other or listen to each other when they're one eye on the phone, one eye allegedly listening to what's going on or interacting with someone face to face, but
Mm,
they're, I mean, Robbie multi screens at times. I'm sure, I mean, he's not the only one. Lots of kids multi screen all the time.
yeah,
They cannot be focused on one thing. And yet they then struggle to focus on something because they're learning to not focus on anything.
yeah,
And they're not actually taking anything in fully because they're actually, I mean, this whole thing about multitasking isn't actually real anyway. We can only focus on one thing at any one time. Someone who multitasks just means that they can switch between the 3 or 4 things they're doing at the same time quickly, but we're still only focused on one thing. But I mean, the amount of times I've seen people in a pub or a restaurant, and so you see like a couple go out for maybe a romantic meal. I don't know what they're actually out there for, but a couple having a meal, say, and yet they're both not talking to each other, both sitting there on their mobile phones,
yeah.
not talking to each other.
What's the
That's
point?
just
Yeah,
crazy to me.
absolutely. People have forgotten how to communicate with each other, haven't they? But also I feel that some of it is distraction as well, because actually, if you're not listening, and particularly if you're not listening to yourself and you're keeping yourself busy and you've got noise on around you all of the time, and you don't actually take that time to just be and listen, you're distracting yourself, possibly because there's something within you that makes you feel really uncomfortable and you don't want to address it and you don't want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay, that's understandable. Um, but equally, taking that time to address it may actually make you feel a lot more comfortable with yourself, and with the things that are going on around you. And it may be something as simple as just accepting that what happened happened and forgiving yourself. And then it'll be easier to listen to yourself a bit more. Does that make sense?
Yes, because I was listening.
Good.
And for anyone that wasn't listening, or if it didn't make sense, rewind and listen again. That's one of the beauties of recordings is that people can then, if they do miss something, they can go back and listen, of
Yes,
course. So,
absolutely. And that's something I've said to my students as well. Part of the reason that I record a lot of the training sessions that I do is so that they can go back and listen again. Because often you pick up something else or you pick up additional information when you listen to something again, because again, you're in that moment, you're listening to the conversation that was being held previously, and so it's a lot easier to pick up on new information that maybe you missed the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. Ah,
So, yes, listening, um, and making sure that you really are hearing what's being said rather than listening and not hearing, I think is really important.
yeah. I think the key things, just to sort of summarize, the key things are be present, be in the now, be focused on the person that you're listening to or the thing that you're listening to.
Yeah, the recording or whatever it might be. Mm.
So be focused, be in that moment, and just take that step back in terms of pressure on yourself, either to take notes or to 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 have other things going on in your head. So don't listen to something you really want to listen to if you're doing something else.
Yes.
I mean, Dad, I remember Dad. So Dad, as you and I know, but I think we have mentioned this before as well. Dad loves his classical music, and he used to just sit with his eyes shut. I think he was listening, not snoozing, but
Yes.
maybe a bit of both. But he would just sit with his eyes shut and listen to the music, listen and pick out. He taught me, just how to pick out the different instruments and actually follow them and learn about, in my own way, but learning about the intricacies of how all of these instruments weave together to produce this orchestral piece in some way. And he just, so there were other times when he would be doing something else like a jigsaw whilst listening to music, or but he made a point of every so often just closing his eyes and listening to particular pieces. And I think that's part of that skill, is getting us learning how to do that for ourselves, learning to be in that moment, and just like you said about the listening meditation and picking out the birds. And how often do we go for a walk in nature and actually stop, close our eyes and say, okay, that's a blackbird, that's a robin, that's a chiffchaff, that's a sparrow, that's a skylark, I don't know, whatever birds it is that you're hearing.
Mm.
They can just merge together rather than taking that time to actually
So
single
that's
them
so
out.
you've just given the listeners two additional rather nice little things that they can do to help their listening skills. And the first one is to sit and listen to some music and see if you can actually pick out a particular instrument, just by sitting and listening and being in the moment. And the other one is when you're out for a walk, just stopping, listening, see what you can hear.
There you go. I wasn't going to point it out because I was going to see if the listeners were listening. But but yeah,
Okay. So hopefully that's given them some really good pointers of things they can do to improve their listening skills, because when you improve your listening skills, it's going to help your relationship with yourself. And at the end of the day, the most important relationship that you have is the one with yourself.
yes,
And you need to listen to yourself as much as you need to listen to anybody else.
absolutely. Well, possibly more so.
Yes, possibly more so.
But no, interesting topic, and thank you for listening.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening to me too.
Excellent.
Okay, so until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.